the spurs at night, and he's surprised as he's about to go and blow up the old House of Lords. And here are the conspirators. Let me just point out a couple of them. I want you to note Thomas Winter, he's a patsy. He's a patsy. Catesby is a double agent. Fawkes is a patsy. Thomas Percy is a double agent. The rest of these are largely patsies. So it's a group that has at least 2 certified double agents in the group.
Can you just describe exactly what patsy is?
It means that they're being used. It'll become obvious as we go along. So here's the patsies of today, the 19 accused. As we toggle back and forth from the patsies of 400 years ago. So the Anglo-American financier faction has terrorism as its birth bang, and now as part of its death rattle, because that's what we're living through. Here's the idea. Originally, they rented an adjoining building. They tried to tunnel under here. That took way too long. They started in 1604. And eventually they said, well, why not just do the obvious? Let's rent the cellar of the building and load that up with gunpowder. Except it wasn't gunpowder, as we'll see in just a minute. And this, of course, is Guy Fawkes, the most famous patsy of all time. Meaning, the expression guy, like guys and dolls, comes from him. You guys, fall guy, he's the fall guy. Guy Wire. The Guy Wire is what holds up his statue on the cart in the old days here, but they used to parade them around. So his name has become a very common word in the language, practically synonymous with any individual, a guy, right? So from the patsies of then to the patsies of now, and in particular the demonized Atta, Guy Fawkes, of course, thoroughly demonized. And the target of this was King James I. Not to get rid of him, not to liquidate him, but to change his policy, to make sure that he kept Robert Cecil in power, to make sure that he was more hostile to Spain than he normally would have been, and other reasons. And that's similar to Bush. That Bush is not an integral part of the creation of 9/11, but like James I, he's somebody who comes to realize that it can help him. All right. Now I recommend people to ask me for a source. Francis Edwards of the Jesuits. He lives in London. He's elderly. He's in declining health. I hope he's still going strong. And he's written on all of the Elizabethan plots, the Throckmorton and all the rest. He's written on the Jacobean plots, the Buy, the Maine, the coronation plots, and he's coming out with a 700-page definitive study on the gunpowder plot. Has that been published? Anybody who really follows this? Anyway, he has a summary paragraph. He's also got a short article from a couple of years ago. Here's an older one, the gunpowder plot. There was a flare-up of interest around about 100 years ago or so. And this is a guy called Girard, again, also a Jesuit. I don't endorse the Jesuits, but they're, of course, the ones who want to write about this stuff. And it's often very useful. Now, this entire period of English history, what you may think is Elizabeth and James, it's not. It's the Regnum Cecilianum. It is the rule of the 2 Cecils, William Cecil, Lord Burghley, the elder, and Robert Cecil, the Earl of Salisbury, the younger. And their method is a police state. It is to use fear and paranoia directed against Catholics as a principle of rule. And I have to say this is not widely understood by British historians, because it's based on the fact that Catholics at this point were either a very large minority, or indeed the majority of the country were still Catholics in their religious preferences. And again, go to all those northern mansions with priest holes, and you'll begin to get an idea. We'll come back to this theme in a minute. There's Cecil the Elder. He's the one who controls Queen Elizabeth much of the time. Good Queen Bess, I think, a very bad misnomer. There he is writing on his renewal. Now, his right-hand man and sidekick is Francis Walsingham, who founds the British Intelligence Services. This person is a Venetian, and we'll realize why it's important that he's a Venetian. He was, during the time of Bloody Mary, he went to Padua in Italy and was recruited by the Venetians, because that's, of course, part of the Venetian state. He was then made the president of the English group at the University of Padua, very numerous, William Harvey, all kinds of important people were there. So he becomes a Venetian. And he's one of the people who bring the Venetian method of intelligence operations, which is the most advanced in the world at the time, here to Britain. And one of the commentators on this, cited by Girard, says that Robert Cecil inherited the double spirit of his predecessor Walsingham in his legerdemain. Double spirit, of course, means that you use double agents and dupes to get things done. Today we would say false flag. That's double spirit. But there's Cecil the Younger. This is a flattering picture because he was not a handsome man. He was disabled in the sense that he was, of course, a hunchback. And Shakespeare makes much of this. Now, I don't know if you can see that. That's the rainbow portrait of Queen Elizabeth I. The best seats for this thing are undoubtedly in the front. If you can see what she's got on her cape, it's eyes and ears. Eyes and ears. Look carefully. I wish I had this bigger. She's also got on her sleeve a huge snake, a boa constrictor or something of this sort. And again, this is a toga of hers that is emblematic. Again, look at all those eyes, and look at all those ears. That she presides over a police state. And you have sadists worthy of Lavrenti burial. You have this guy called Topcliffe. Topcliffe takes prisoners home from the tower and keeps them in his home so he can torture them if he gets bored in the night. He can have some sessions with them. The character of Polonius in Hamlet, right? The really sententious, lecturing, hectoring old nincompoop, glad he's neither a borrower nor a lender be. That's Cecil the Elder. And above all, what Shakespeare wants to point out is the guy's a hypocrite. Because if you look at Polonius, he's trying to sell his daughter to get social advancement for himself. That's Robert Cecil the Younger. Now Shakespeare hates him even more. He is the original for Richard III. Lots of I lay inductions dangerous, and so forth. It was intrigue, deception, playing one person against another, trying to dupe people into destroying themselves, to create deadly hatred. That's Richard III equals Robert Cecil. Caliban in The Tempest, the misshapen creature, Robert Cecil. There he is again in another portrait. He's also Lord Angelo in Measure for Measure, the hypocrite who pretends to be so pure, and then he's trying to abuse young women and take them to bed in a completely hypocritical way. And he's also Iago in Othello, the Venetian who's whispering into Othello's ear and making him jealous and getting him to destroy himself. All of these are images from Shakespeare of Robert Cecil. And his method, as you see here, it's the same one that's being used today. On the way over here, 2,000 terrorists in Britain. Well, when the Catholics, the papists, became too popular, you have to fix some design on them which the common people will believe, and then go to town. Same thing that we've seen on 7/7, 9/11, and all the rest. Now, the goals of the Cecil faction are obviously to keep the power of the Cecil bloc. They also want to have the oppression of Catholics because that is the cause that they have wedded, and that's the only way that they can keep this possible majority down. The other goal is war with Spain, and we'll see why that is in just a minute. So here we are in Lent of 1604. This is all documented. And again, if you'd like to get a copy of the slideshow, you can just give a service fee to the group. One of the people, Catesby, double agent, meets Winter, Duke, and says, let's do something to help the Catholics. King James had promised tolerance, but he was not delivering. Then if you wanted to do something, you'd probably go after Robert Cecil himself, who was the most hated and everybody knew was the embodiment of this policy. But instead they say, let's blow up everything. The king, the lords, the commons, everybody else, including many, many Catholics, who are going to get blown up, because there are lots of them in the House of Lords. Here's a report, and you can see it's all here, Public Record Office, Calendar of State Papers Domestic. This is an agent, an intelligencer, or pursuivant, as they were called, to Sir Thomas Challoner, one of Cecil's lieutenants. He says there's a discoverer named Davies who's working a plot